So welcome everyone. Good evening. We would like to welcome you to this webinar on working in gender empowerment with UN Women. And we are looking forward to spending this time with you in a remote mode. So thank you for your interest. My name is Joachim Kerkan. I work as an outreach and recruitment officer here with Zinfo, and I will be your moderator today. I am in the room with two colleagues in here, Gary and Gabriela. You might have been in touch already with them. It will be the case in the future as well. So this is the crew working behind the scene in order to make this webinar possible. On the other hand of the line, we have, of course, Mamta and Julia, both based in New York. Hi, Mamta. Hi, Julia. I hope you can see me well. You can hear me well as well. You can turn your microphone on just to test if everything works well.
Yeah, can you hear us?
Yes, we do. We do. Hi, Julia.
Hi.
I'm glad this is working. Hi, Mamta.
Hi. Good afternoon.
And we can see your colleague as well, supporting you on the IT side as well. So thank you very much for all of this IT support. Okay, good. So, all right, in terms of participants, as I said, we're now around 50 people. We're very happy about this number. And we have, as far as we know at this stage, people specialized in different fields with different backgrounds, with different level of experiences. So along the way, we will make sure to clarify the profile of the people, to answer the question of the people, to make sure we can address the diversity of the participants attending this webinar. Very briefly, why is Zinfo doing this work? So this is part of a mandate we got from the Swiss Development Agency. UN Women is a strong partner organization, and Zinfo was tasked to increase the visibility of UN Women in Switzerland among the gender community. And our role is also to support people in applying. This is why we combine these two events. There is the webinar on the first hand, so we're going to spend an hour and a half together in order to exchange and to give you as many informations and tips as well about the organizations and how to apply. And afterwards, for the people who qualify and who are interested to go further into the process of applying to UN Women and getting closer to this organization, you have the possibility to get back on our website and send us your resume, and we will organize bilateral talks with Mamta. Okay. With regard to this webinar, after this introduction, we'll give the floor to Julia, who will tell us more about UN Women from an institutional perspective and the role of this organization in fostering gender equality. He will afterwards focus on his role as well within UN Women and his tips to people interested by the work of the organization and interested to join the organization. Afterwards, we'll be happy to give the floor to Mamta, who will address the HR perspective, the HR side of the organization, and give you tips as well, and as many informations as possible about applications, positions, etc., etc. A brief word on technical issue. As participants, you're not able to use microphones, and this is the reason why it says that you're muted in your box on the right-hand side of your screen. So you must type the questions, you must type your comments, and Gabriela, just next to me, will take all of them along the way. She will answer along the presentation if she can, and otherwise I will take them up to the conversation, and we'll ask Mamta and Julien directly. Okay. In addition, we have the possibility to activate some surveys along the presentation, and I will start right away for you to see how it looks like and for us to get more information about our public. So I'm asking you now, how familiar are you with the work of UN Women? This should appear now on your screen, and you have the possibility to answer. So I'll ask you to answer straight away. I can see that this is already the case. I can see the answers coming in. So very easy and a good way to interact with our attendees. Okay, so Mamta and Julien, this is the results of this first survey. How familiar are the people with your organization? We have 18% very familiar and 49% somewhat familiar. 18% have a vague idea of the goals of the organization, and for 16% of the people, this is the first time they hear about the organization, or at least that's the first contact they have with the organization. So as you can see, most of our people today have a good understanding of UN Women, and we'll be happy to go deeper in understanding the organization. And you also have a good 30% of the participants who are not familiar with the organization. Okay. So this is it from my side. I'll now give the floor to Julien. So thank you very much, Julien, for being with us today. You have been in touch with SINFO for quite a while now. You're a Swiss national. You work as special assistant to the Deputy Executive Director at UN Women headquarters in New York. And prior to joining UN Women, you worked with UNFPA as program specialist in gender and human rights in Kazakhstan, and before as communication analyst. Okay, so now, Julien, we're looking forward to hearing you about UN Women, but also about your everyday work, of course, and the tips you have for the people who join us this evening. The floor is yours, Julien.
Thank you very much, Joachim, and it's great to be here and to interact with Switzerland. I haven't been back for a long time, so that's a way to reconnect a little bit. And also you mentioned that before being with UN Women, I was with UNFPA, and in fact I should say that my first job, the start of my career with the UN, was in Kyrgyzstan. I was a UN volunteer with UNFPA there, and I was funded by the SDC and recruited by SINFO. So I was very happy to be able to give back a little bit today and then hopefully motivate and inspire other people to follow a similar path. So let me tell you a little bit about UN Women first, and of course I'll be happy to go more in depth if there are specific questions. So if we go to the second slide, what is UN Women? I know exactly how the technical things are working, so hopefully people can see the PowerPoint presentation. UN Women is the latest addition to the UN family. We have just joined in 2010. We have been created in 2010 by the General Assembly of the United Nations. And it was a big achievement. It took more than 5 years for the member states of the UN to agree to create UN Women and to create really a global organization with a mandate exclusively focused on the empowerment of women and the promotion of gender equality. It was also a result of UN reform because it was about consolidating different parts of the system which were already working on gender equality and women's empowerment. So there were 4 entities that were before working on this. You may have heard of UNIFEM or the Division for the Advancement of Women. So all these 4 entities and 2 more entities that were put together and created UN Women. And it was in fact the only, I think it's the only UN organization that is such a result of UN reform, trying to streamline the mandates of the different departments and organizations of the UN, and to also give it a stronger weight, a stronger, higher importance. We are headed by an Under-Secretary General, so it's the rank just below the Secretary General, which means we have a political weight and we have a political role to play, both within the UN system, but more importantly around the world with governments to try to support them, governments and national partners to advance gender equality and to achieve gender equality actually and the empowerment of women. So if we go to the third slide, which just gives a quick overview of the 3 mandate areas that we have. Sorry, we're just having a problem on our side now with not seeing. Yeah. So the third slide, we have 3 mandate areas, and I'm not going to go into too many details, but it's just to give you a sense that UN Women works at different levels. First, we have a normative support function, which means that we support governments here at the UN, here in New York, when they make decisions of a normative nature on standards and on norms and standards, global norms and standards for gender equality. So, for example, next week on Monday, the Commission on the Status of Women is meeting, and every year this commission meets to look at one specific topic related to gender equality and to define a set of policy actions that become a set of recommendations to governments to put in place in order to promote gender equality. So, for example, this year we are going to look at the issue of how the Millennium Development Goals have fared for women and girls. And that's also going to be an opportunity to discuss how we can create a development agenda that can be more effective to promote gender equality and that can bring more results and benefits to women and girls around the world. So that's just one example of some of the normative support functions that we do. Then our second mandate area is the UN coordination function. So as you know, the UN system is huge. I think there are 57 different entities in the UN, organizations and departments. So we have a mandate to mainstream gender perspective in the work of other organizations and to hold them accountable to the commitments that the UN has taken on gender equality. We have the UN as a system has a very diverse mandate on the promotion of gender equality, and we as UN Women are not in a position, we're a very small organization compared to other big organizations like UNDP or the UN Secretariat, but we have a responsibility to try to hold the other organizations accountable so that they do the work for us in a way, to simplify it. The third mandate area is our operational activities, and this is really, let's say, the hands in the mud or the feet in the mud. It's basically our programs. We are present in many countries. Mamta will tell us more about our regional presence later. But we have programs, we work with governments, we work with civil society at the regional level, at the country level, and that's the third part of our mandate. And the interesting thing with UN Women, which is very unusual for the UN system, is that we actually have these 3 different areas in one organization. For example, an organization like UNDP, the UN Development Program, has a strong focus on operational activities, but they don't really do any work on the normative side. I mean, they do, but they don't really have a mandate for that. We actually have a mandate to support governments in strengthening norms and standards, and we also have a mandate for coordination. So this is an interesting feature of UN Women, and what we're trying to do, and still we're very young, but what we're trying to do is also to strengthen the linkages between these 3 areas, so that we're not just working in these things in silos, but that we're actually taking advantage of, for example, how do we use the norms and standards that governments agree at the global level? How do we then translate that into programs and operational activities at the country level to implement these norms and standards? So if we go to the next slide, that will give you just an overview of the thematic areas where we work. As I said, I mean, gender equality it really touches on all spheres of life, but we have to focus on a few areas where we really do the core of our work. And these are, so we have 5 thematic area, and we have a 6th area, which is the last one, which is about strengthening global norms and standards, and I have already spoken about that. But if we start at the top, the first area where we work is increasing women's leadership and participation. As you know, there are very few countries, I think just about 30 countries, that have reached what we call the critical mass of women's representation in national parliaments of 30%, which is even too low. It should really be 50%. But we know that after 30%, it's a critical mass, and generally numbers tend to increase. So we work on that. We also work on women's leadership and participation at the local levels, in local administrations. We have a great program in India, for example, where more than 1 million women are now part of local councils, making decisions, on very concrete decisions in villages and communities. And we also work, with political parties to encourage them to increase women's participation in their lists, women candidates. We work with women candidates also to strengthen their capacity so that they have the tools and the same opportunities that men enjoy. So it's a very broad range of different issues. And also as part of this women's leadership and participation component, we also have a human rights aspect. We work very closely with the human rights system of the UN, trying to ensure that women's rights are upheld in countries across the world. And we work very closely with the CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and their committee. So that's a quick snapshot of the first one. The second one is about enhancing women's economic empowerment, and again, that's very broad. We work at the policy level with governments for them to adopt policies that will promote women's economic empowerment, and it can go from trying to increase women's participation in the labor force to looking at policies that try to reconcile work with family responsibilities, and also trying to engage more men in taking responsibility for family duties and caregiving duties. We also work more in concrete terms with women's entrepreneurs, trying to help them increase access to markets and not just microcredit and micro interventions, but actually looking at how we can scale up the work that they do on the economic field. The third area is ending violence against women, and that's a very big priority. As you perhaps know, 1 in 3 women will experience or has experienced in her lifetime some sort of violence, sexual violence, physical violence, abuse, harassment. It's really a huge, what we refer to as a pandemic, and it's one that is not talked enough about. And of course, in the last years, we have heard about the horrific cases in India and in other places around the world. But actually, it happens every day. Okay, sorry. In public spaces and in private spaces, and this is one of our greatest priorities, to look at prevention and response to violence against women. The fourth area is to engage women in all aspects of peace and security processes. So we work in conflict countries, but also in post-conflict countries. We try to have more women at the peace-making table so that they can provide their perspective on what they believe is essential to a sustainable peace. We try to increase women's mediator. Recently, Mary Robinson, who used to be the former president of Ireland and also the High Commissioner for Human Rights, was the first regional mediator for the Great Lakes region, the first woman appointed as a mediator by the Secretary General. So we are very far from having gender parity in mediators. But we also work on reconstruction and different aspects of post-conflict transition, electoral assistance, and this type of things. It's again a very broad area of work. And then the last thematic area is about gender responsive planning and budgeting, and that's really working with governments as to how they make the national budget more gender sensitive, looking at how decisions that governments, and I'm talking about governments at the national level, but also in fact at the local level in communities, how governments can make a difference by making budget decisions, and how these budget decisions that they make impact women and men differently, and therefore how they can be made differently to promote gender equality, more equality, and also to benefit women more directly. So just very quickly, I think I just wanted the next slide, if you look at slide number 5, I just thought it would be, we are a fairly young organization, but it's important to look back at some of the achievements that already took place in 3 years. The first is, I already mentioned, the consolidation of the 4 entities, but also not just, it's not just about putting the pieces together, but it's also about making them work together and do something that is more than the sum of the previous pieces. So really the kind of added value of UN Women and scaling up. And I think, now we are really one organization with one identity, with one strategic direction, with one executive director. So we have a sense of purpose and a sense of common direction, and this is a very big achievement. I know it might not sound such a big achievement, but actually to put together an organization with more than 1,000 people spread all over the world is a huge challenge, and I think we have we're slowly at least coming to to reaching the end of this transition period. The second aspect that I want to mention is also the regional architecture, because a big part of UN Women's creation was also about making the work in the field, the operational activities, to increase our presence in the field. So we had what we call the regional architecture, and Mamta will talk more about that, but also about having more stronger and more effective operations, better systems, better, again, strategic directions. So, for example, we have a strategic plan that is approved by our executive board, and that guides our operations at the country level. And we have all sorts of processes. I'm not going to go into the details to help us be very focused and to try and make a difference. The third aspect, third achievement looking back, is also how we have managed to position UN Women as the global advocate for gender equality and women's rights. We have played an important role, for example, at the Rio Plus 20 conference on sustainable development to try to make sure that gender issues were included into the outcome, and there is a whole chapter on gender equality and women's empowerment in the future we want, which is the outcome of the Rio conference. And there are many other examples where we are, where we have taken a leadership role in trying to advocate for women's rights. Our executive director, our former executive director used to be the president of Chile, and actually will be again the president of Chile, Ms. Michelle Bachelet. So she had access to world leaders. She made a lot of advocacy to speak to them. And our new executive director has a similar stature because she used to be the deputy president, of South Africa. And so again, a very strong political role and a strong advocacy role for UN Women and its leadership. The next achievement is accountability for the UN system, and we have put in place a whole framework of accountability. The 57 entities of the UN system have to report on an annual basis on progress they have made, and it goes from how they have incorporated gender perspectives into their program to also how much parity there is, gender parity there is in their organizations. And finally, the last one, the issue of funding. UN Women, the gender equality project has always been underfunded, and so UN Women and its former 4 entities have always been underfunded, and we have managed to increase our funding. Last year, we reached for the first time our target of $150 million in core funding. In addition to that, we receive also project funding, what we call non-core, and our target is 300 million. This year, I think it's a little bit higher, and we very much hope to reach it. And Switzerland has been a great supporter, actually, of that. Switzerland is among our top donors, but it's still a very big challenge to really try and have UN Women better funded. When UN Women was created, the idea was that we would have a budget of 500 million US dollars, and we are barely at the now 230 million. So we're still far from this big target that we wanted to reach. And now the next slide will also give you a sense of what is coming up, and that this year and next year we have a big event, and that's the 20 years anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, which is like the document that really, together with the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, that guides our work and that guides the work of government in trying to implement gender equality policies. And so this year we will celebrate the 20 years of this anniversary. We're trying to have a whole campaign around this Beijing Plus 20 to have a mobilization, a political mobilization of governments so that they recommit to the agenda, and also a social mobilization trying to first or to engage again all the different gender advocates around the world, but also to fire up a new generation of gender equality advocates and young people and men and boys, so that it becomes really a project that many people are engaged in. The second key aspect looking forward is the post-2015 development agenda. So as you know, the Millennium Development Goals will reach their deadline in 2015. Some of them have been achieved in some countries, in some regions. Some of them have not been achieved. But for sure, one aspect that has been lagging behind is how they have benefited women and girls. The Millennium Development Goals have not, evidence shows that they have not benefited women and girls as much as they could have. And so we are in the process of defining the post-2015 development agenda. Now it's in the hands of the member states. We have made a number of proposals, and they're discussing. It will take 1 year, but for them to agree on a set of new goals. But of course, we will be advocating, and we will be continuing a dialogue with member states to encourage them to make sure that gender equality is central to this new development agenda, but also that it's not just limited to, as it was in the MDGs, access to education or, women in parliament, but that it's also about a real transformative agenda looking at the different aspects, economic empowerment, political participation, ending violence against women, and other aspects as well. Looking forward, we also need to be focused on concrete results in countries and in regions. And I already explained our different areas, but I think the strengthening of our operations is a big priority looking forward, and we're definitely strengthening our presence in the field. So I'm mentioning that because I know a lot of you are interested in applying to UN Women or considering applying to UN Women, and there will be a lot of very concrete hands-on work in the field also in the years to come. And then the last priority is enhanced funding, and I already spoke about that. So in the
Julien, maybe just one question before moving on to your specific role. Just on slide number 4, you mentioned the priority areas of UN Women. Could you tell us in a nutshell what area has been the more successfully addressed, and which one was the more challenging, or is the more challenging?
Yeah. Well, it really depends how you look at it, because I think we have seen great progress in women's leadership and participation. I think when UN Women was created, there were about 26 or 27 countries that had reached this critical mass of 30%. Now today we are at 32 or 33. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but actually to have countries make that cross that bar is a big achievement. I think that actually also the last area on strengthening global norms and standards has been a big achievement for UN Women, one where there has been a lot of success. And that's because, you see, before there was nobody at the political level. I made reference to our Undersecretary General. There was nobody at that level who could advocate with member states at the highest level, with presidents and prime ministers, for them to take this agenda seriously. And now UN Women is able to do that. So there has been really a lot of success in this area. I think we have also done a lot of progress in ending violence against women, at least in creating programs that we know work, in gathering the evidence of countries that have seen progress on preventing and responding to violence against women. But in terms of real impact, we're still far from it. And as I said, it's still a very big problem in actually in every country around the world. There is no country where violence against women doesn't happen, and there is not enough investment in this area. So there has been progress, and then in terms of challenging, I think the big challenge is really the money, and that cuts across all the areas, but especially in the gender planning and budgeting, it's very difficult to convince governments to change their policies and to change their budgets and to convince them that this will have an impact on the lives of women and girls. So that's maybe an area which is more difficult to see progress in.
Okay, thank you, Julien.
So was there any other question, or should I just move to the my profile, what I do,
Yeah.
etc.?
Yeah. Yes, you can move on.
Okay, so I am the special assistant to the Deputy Executive Director. Maybe I should have started with that, actually. And just, so what does it mean to be the special assistant to the Deputy Executive Director? It means that I pretty much have to do everything and nothing, everything that she needs. So her name is Lakshmi Puri, and she's our Deputy Executive Director. She focuses on intergovernmental support, UN coordination, and strategic partnerships. But she's also involved in, as part of the executive leadership, in really setting the strategic direction for the organization. And so my role is really to support her in everything she does. So it goes from planning her schedule and making sure that I maximize her time so that we prioritize some meetings over others in the benefit of the organization, to make sure that she meets people that she has to meet and that she tells them what she needs to tell them. So that's, you know, a lot of time management and what I put on the slide, substantive preparations. I have to write her talking points or consult with colleagues for them to provide me with some input. I have to write her speeches. I have to coordinate with the colleagues across the 5 divisions of UN Women. I have to align my the Deputy Executive Director's program with the Executive Director's program and with the other Deputy Executive Director's program. And also, I have to give her advice. So sometimes she asks me, you know, about certain directions, or I need to find the people who need to give her the right advice. So it's a very big range of different things. In terms of my profile, I think the typical profile of a special assistant is someone who has done a lot of different things, who is not necessarily a specialist, a technical specialist in one area. I would say that the common thread through my career in the UN, I've been with the UN for more than 9 years now, and the common thread has been working on gender issues. But I've done that in very different functions. I've worked in communication and advocacy in Kyrgyzstan. I've worked in UN coordination in Tajikistan. I've worked in an executive office of UNFPA where I was doing more the talking points, briefing notes, processing part. I've worked in a regional office also for UNFPA where I was coordinating programs on gender and human rights. And so I use a little bit of all these experiences to inform my work here with the Deputy Executive Director. And some of the major undertakings, I just thought, you know, it's interesting perhaps for you to know concretely what does it mean. Well, I mentioned the Rio Plus 20 conference. So in this case, I was really working with a whole team under the leadership of the Deputy Executive Director to try to influence the negotiations. So I was talking to member states. I was trying to work with them on some language that we would want to include into the outcome. We were organizing a number of events, so we had colleagues from field offices working with us on trying to showcase some of the work they have done in the field in different areas related to the conference. So it was a very broad very broad scope of work, and really a lot of interaction, a lot of talking, a lot of coordination. That's a similar one with the Commission on the Status of Women. We are very busy this week, and next week and the week after we'll be incredibly busy. The Deputy Executive Director, to give you a sense, will start her days at 8 a.m. and she will have a 20-minute lunch on most days, and then she will finish probably around 10 p.m. every day. But it's also very exciting. It's a lot of meetings, a lot of decisions that are made on policy directions, a lot of opportunities to influence the political debates and to promote the gender equality agenda. And so I'm in the middle trying to coordinate these different things. In terms of the challenges, I think one issue is time management for myself and also work-life balance. I think it's the job of special assistant. Now I've been doing it for 2 years, and I'm a little bit tired sometimes because it's really a 24/7 job. You are on call all the time, every day, in the evening, in the morning, in the weekend, and it's very exciting. But of course, it's also difficult to balance that with life. So I think it's a job that you do for a while and then you move on. It's also the challenge is to balance the multiple priorities, and sometimes the decisions that I make at my level can have a real impact on the organization. If I decide to say no to someone for meeting with the deputy executive director, or if I don't have the right talking points, or if I don't think about the right thing to say, and that the deputy executive director also doesn't think about it, it could have consequences for the organization. So to balance these multiple priorities, and also to balance the substantive part with the logistics. I spend a lot of time, scheduling, and it's okay. I mean, there is an assistant helping me, but still doing the coordination of the logistics. But then at the same time, I need to be on top of the latest thinking and the developments and the political issues, and what are the member states saying, and what are the negotiations, what are the issues in the negotiations. So that's also another challenge to balance that. And now the last slide where
Julien, a short.
Yes.
Sorry, Julien, before moving to your last slide, I would suggest to take up a few questions because people are reacting to what you're saying now. Maybe first of all, like the time management and the work-life balance dimension. Like this is something like it's a kind of a picture you have from the UN, and that's something most of the people would hear about the UN. Is it always like that, or what is your observation? Is it due to the fact that it is at headquarters, or is it even worse in the field, or how do you assess this? Because it's beside the fact that it's like a bit an anecdote, beside it's still a real question. I mean, for people interested to join the UN, how can I combine this with work-life balance, which is something that's getting more and more important among young generations, and also in Switzerland. So what's your opinion about this?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Mamta can also say a few words about that, but I think that this is a little bit specific to the task of special assistants. I mean, what I have described, this kind of 24/7 type of thing, it's a little bit because of the job. I think that actually in the UN, and also based on my previous jobs, yes, it is a demanding job, and you need to relocate in different countries, which has impact on your family life. You need to, sometimes, you also have a passion. I mean, you're in this job not to make money, but really to make a difference. And so, you have a certain drive, and that tends to sometimes be difficult to manage also for yourself. You have to learn to balance that with, with your own life, and not to be just selflessly letting yourself take over by the job. But I think that the UN actually has very good policies on work-life balance, and they are always, developing more. And if you can take advantages of these policies, and I have taken advantage of these policies in the past, it's just my current job is a little more difficult to do so. But if you can take advantage of these policies, you can actually have a good work-life balance. For example, when I was with UNFPA, we had we would work 9 days, a little bit longer, and then the 10th day, the Friday, would be off every second week. And I think in UN Women we have a similar policy, right, Mamta?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So there are different policies. Also, telecommuting is available, or working from home. There are very different aspects that really, I think, in terms of benefiting work-life balance, are available to you. But for sure, if you apply for a special assistant job, then I think you need to be ready to give a little bit, to go a little bit above the call of duty. And that's not, I mean, your boss is just working as hard. So at least I know that the reason why I'm working sometimes on the weekends is not because, I'm being abused, but it's actually because, there are things to do, and my boss is also at work. So yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, very much. So there is a possibility to have a life even if we work for the UN.
Or maybe Mamta can add a bit to that.
Of course. He has been to a specific post. He's talking about one specific post, but we do have other 110 types of positions where you can, of course, have your balanced life. And also, as Julian said, that we do have some kind of benefits also where you can work with your supervisor, or if you are the supervisor, you can work with your team, that how you can balance your life, like working from home or remote management. If you are traveling, you get the day off. Like if you are traveling in a weekend, you can take a day off in a work day. So there are like certain things, the benefits of working. And one more thing is that this is because we are growing as a newborn organization, and since we don't have a human resources, the capacity is not yet there. We haven't reached there. So that's why the people have to have a little bit of a more dedication at this point, and they are working a little hard. But the motivation factor, the career development factor, the monitoring factor is very high in UN Women, and this is not yet officially announced, but could be announced soon, which is by staff counseling, that the motivation factor is there, and a very exciting organization to work in UN system.
Okay, thank you. We have two more questions to Julien with regard to your background. Interesting question. One from Camille asking, why gender equality? How did you land in that field and what did you study? And another question, interesting as well, is related to your UN volunteer experience. So how was your transition from UN volunteer to UN staff member? And I can see on my screen that this question is asked by a former UNV. So Julien, people are curious to hear more about this. Okay.
Well, on the first question, which was can you just repeat the first question? Sorry.
Yeah, the first question was why gender equality and how did you land in that field?
Yeah. Well, a little bit by coincidence, quite frankly. I studied, you were asking also by my background. I did my bachelor in Australia, a bachelor in international relations, and then I did my master's at the HEI in Geneva. At the time it was a DEA. I know now everything has changed, but and then after that I joined as a volunteer. Shortly after that I joined as a UN volunteer. So I had a very generic, international relations academic background, and my first job was with UNFPA, and that's really how I started looking more into issues of gender equality. And it's something that really passioned me because I think, too often, and I mean, you will see that in the composition of UN Women staff, it's a large majority of women, but men are not looking enough at gender equality issues and how it impacts them. And personally, I'm very, engaged on trying to have more men and boys speaking out for gender equality first, but also to see the benefits to them as men. For example, you were talking about work-life balance, so, reconciliation of family and work responsibilities. A lot of men want to be involved and engaged fathers, but they have certain pressures on them to, in many countries, maybe not so much in Switzerland, but even in Switzerland, to, work more, to be the breadwinner, etc. So gender equality is really about deconstructing, these gender stereotypes and the social norms that put us into boxes and that constrain our opportunities and are really, instead we should be looking at how we can realize our dreams regardless of whether they conform with one or the other gender. So I became quite passionate about this issue, and UNFPA, as you know, focuses on sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. And the whole population development agenda. So that was also an issue very present there, talking about fatherhood, about maternity leave, about reproductive choices and the role of men in that. And so it was a very, let's say, interesting field, and that's how I built my knowledge in this area. Now, in terms of transitioning from a UNV to a UN position, actually for me it was fairly natural. And you see, I think it depends a lot where you go for your UN volunteers post. When I was in Kyrgyzstan and I was the UNV at UNFPA, I was, my title was Communication and Advocacy Officer. I happened to be a UNV, but no one was ever, treating me differently because I was a UN volunteer. So in a way, I already felt a little bit like a staff member, like a normal UN staff member, even though I wasn't technically. And then I applied, and then actually UNFPA extended me for a while as a UN volunteer. And then there was a position in Tajikistan for UN Coordination Officer, which I applied to, and I got it. So it was a fairly natural transition, I would say.
Okay, very good, Julien. Thank you very much. Okay, maybe in relation to that, so what would be the next stage for you?
That's a very good question. I wish I knew. And that's, actually that brings me to a broader point, which is that in the UN, I think there is not really a typical career path. And there is not really, of course there are different, tracks, but there isn't really someone where you can say, oh, this person followed that path, or this person followed this path. Everyone has a very different path. And it's exciting because you can really craft your future, and you can really choose where you want to go as the next step. At the same time, it can be a little bit stressful for those who want to know, okay, in 15 years I will be there and I will be doing this. I cannot say what I would do in 10 years or in 15 years. What I know is that I would like at some point to go back to the field because I really enjoyed my work in the field. I very much enjoy my work at headquarters too, but I think the field has also this sense of more direct contact with the work that we are here for. So I would love to go back to the field at some point, and perhaps to be a representative for UN Women, or maybe at some point later on a resident coordinator for the UN system. So these are things that interest me. I think it's very important when you enter the UN to be ready to do this back and forth between the field and the headquarters, especially if you come to an agency like UN Women or UNDP or UNFPA, what we call the funds and programs, even though UN Women is a little different, because we have that work in the field, and you need to understand the work in the field and to have been there in order to do your work at headquarters in a good way. That's at least my personal view. So yeah, that's my answer.
Okay, thank you very much, Julien. All right, we have a couple of few questions here on the screen. I would suggest we move on with your presentation, and okay, afterwards we'll give the floor to Mamta, and we can always come back to some of the questions we have here. So, if not mistaken, you still have a slide, Julien.
Yes, it's my last slide, and I actually touched on a lot of it already, so I'm not going to repeat. But just a few tips and advice, which are really like personal advice and tips. I think, if you are thinking about coming to UN Women, I think you need to have this passion for gender equality and women's empowerment. I see too many people, not necessarily here at UN Women, that enter the UN in absolutely anything just because they want to work for the UN. And I think that's really a pity. I think that when you choose to work for the UN is a very broad organization that works in very different fields. So you need to already have a general idea of the areas you want to work in. And personally, I really strongly believe that if you come to UN Women, you should have knowledge about gender equality, or at least you should have a passion for it and come here for that, for the promotion of gender equality. Then the second aspect I already mentioned, readiness to relocate and work in multiple countries. It's not easy. I'm married, and my wife, has gone from being a consultant to having a great job. So, for example, here in New York, she has found a job in a private foundation, and we're very lucky. But many colleagues, have spouses who cannot always find jobs. so where they are, and then maybe in 2 years, or maybe in 5 years, or maybe in 10 years, we will move, and it's not easy to combine a dual career. So this is also something that you need to be ready to move, and that has an impact on your family. The third thing is working in a large organization and making a difference. And this I just wanted to highlight because I think many people come to the UN and then they get frustrated because they feel that they're a little piece of the puzzle and that they cannot really make a difference. And yes, the UN, and including UN Women, even though we're small, we're still a big organization compared to a small NGO. And there is some hierarchy, there is some bureaucracy, absolutely. The issue, I think, is really to come in with a positive attitude and think, okay, how can I use the system to make a difference? And try to, you will not always be the one distributing, food in the refugee camps. But the question is, how does your contribution help the final goal of the organization? So it's important, I think, to have that in mind, and also to keep that as something that, every day, even when you have frustrations, like in every job, that continues to drive you and make you work for the organization. Defining a career path, I already spoke about that. And then finally, I just want to say also, it's important to be patient and persistent. I suppose that many of you who are in the webinar have already maybe applied for the UN. Maybe some of you already work for the UN. Maybe some of you applied many, many times and didn't get anything, not even a reply. And as I said, the UN is a huge organization. Mamta can tell us the statistics, but we receive thousands and thousands of applications for one job. So, it's important to be patient and persistent. And just to give you a sense, when I got this job with UN Women, I had applied to 35 other jobs before. So over the course of 1 year. But just to give you a sense that, you need to be patient and you need to apply to different things that correspond to your profile. And you're not always going to get the job, but that doesn't mean that you're not good. It just means that there are other people out there who were a little better this time. So that's for me, and yeah, I can pass the floor to Mamta.
Okay, just Julien, to react to what you just said. So you applied to 35 positions. Do you know what made the difference between the 34 you didn't get and the one you got?
Well, I think there were some positions where I applied and I knew that I wasn't exactly the profile, but I thought, okay, I just throw my name in the hat. So for this position, I think when I read, and it's very interesting because every time I applied, for all my jobs that I had, every time I applied for these jobs, I did it with a sense of confidence. Like when I was reading the job description, I was like, oh, that's exactly me. I remember applying for my job at the executive office of UNFPA and reading the description, and every single line of what was in the job description I had done, or I had the skill, So then to have, and it was the same in a way for this job. So I think this is something that makes a big difference. And also I want to, be very open, and I know that there is a sense out there that you cannot get in the UN unless someone is pushing you. I would like to say that I have never had anyone from inside, either promote me or pull my name out or push me or give me any. I mean, I have always received my job as part of a competitive process. So, even if you don't know anybody in the UN, you have a chance, and so I think it's a very important thing to say also that there is a competitive process and it works, and I have experienced it myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is an important key message, and it relates also to networking, I think, in a positive way, in the sense that networking is important for us from our perspective, from SINFO, to get informed, to get informed about opportunities, to be just at the right place at the right time, to be able, because the positions are open for a short period of time, so not to miss an opportunity. And as you said, to be able really to target your application to a position that is matching your profile. So in terms of networking and in being based in New York, what can you tell to the people? How helpful was that for you to know the UN system and to know people within the UN system? Because I think that networking and to know people can be something very positive as well.
No, absolutely. Networking is very good. As you said, it helps you identify opportunities when they come up. And I think the more you grow in your career, the more important it is, because then, for higher level positions, you need to have some sort of a, people need to know, people will ask, what is your reputation? And I think, the more you grow in your professional career, the more important it is to have a good reputation and to have a wide network of people who can speak to that reputation. So, but even for the entry level, I think, yes, absolutely, very important. Also, it will be important because when you prepare, if you're selected for an interview, for example, when you prepare, you will know how to target your answers. You have someone to ask, for advice. How should I answer, this or that question? So that can be a very useful thing. And certainly I've benefited. Sanfo provided a lot of opportunities, and I benefited a lot from that.
Okay, this is very interesting. Thank you, Julien. Okay, so time is running. So I would suggest now to move on to Mamta and to go deeper into the application process and the HR side of the work and the webinar. Starting with another poll that you can see now on your screen. So have you already applied for a position with UN Women? Very, very curious to see the results.
Okay.
So Mamta, people are answering now the question. Okay, so we have around 20% of our attendees who already applied for a position with UN Women, and 80% who never applied. So Mamta, this gives you an idea about the level of familiarity of the people with your job site and with the application process with UN Women. So the floor is yours, Mamta.